All right, Olivia, this is your show. This is your episode. You went out into the wide world.
I would say it's everyone I interviewed's episode, but yes.
Oh, yeah. So this is a new concept, interviewing, while we're on the subject here.
New
Uh,
concept, never been done before. I'm the
not
first.
not on this podcast.
I
Yeah,
know.
boy, if only that were. Just think about all those interviews out there. So we are taking a different approach to interviewing. A lot of our friends in the podcast sphere like to just do a single interview for their episode or incorporate an interview into an episode, and that's great, and we honor and love them for that. But we've got a little bit different take on it. Olivia, how many people did you talk to for today's conversation about occult creativity and art and occultism?
I talked to 4 people. 4 people, yes.
4 people. What were some of the challenges you found doing this undertaking?
Time zones. Every single person, I don't think anyone was in the same time zone as me. Even there was like at least one person in the USA, and they were just, no, 2 people, and they were not on the same time zone.
So you spent a
So,
lot of time on an airplane to do these interviews.
yes, I am
Yeah.
I am COVID now.
I'm amazed that they'll even let you into the UK. What with,
They let me everywhere, all across Europe. It's incredible. They were like,
Canada?
"Get this American in our country right now." Yeah.
All right, so set us up here. What kind of things will we be hearing? So we're talking about occultism and creativity, right? What does that mean?
So, I think we mostly just I kind of related their art. Well, I had them relate their art back to occulty themes that run throughout their art, but also just I think they're all occulty people. So,
So how that life experience as someone who engages with witchcraft or some variety of occultism or occult mythology informs their creative process and
yeah.
comes into their art.
Yeah.
We, the members
Members
of the secret order of alchemical actors, do solemnly commit ourselves to a full and honest telling of the history of the occult as far as we know it. That is the most synchronized I think we've been. Who are we going to talk to first here?
I believe we're talking to Amy first.
Tell us a little bit about Amy.
Amy is from the UK. She's like a cabaret, burlesque, ritual performance artist who like does a lot of like collecting her blood beforehand to use during like the performances, bloodletting, hook suspension, you name it.
All right, that don't oversell
Yeah.
it. That's good. That's enough.
Yeah.
Let's get in. Let's hear this conversation with Amy about her performance art.
Hi, Olivia. I'm Amy Kingsmill. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm based in London, England, and I'm a performance artist.
Cool. So, I guess how would you, in a, I guess as brief a way as you could, just a overall describe your work to our listeners, because this is auditory. Just
Yeah.
like kind of explain to them exactly like what you mean by performance art.
So I use performance art to kind of mean live art, as in performances that happen, and it's really the idea is the art piece is people being present and watching me do these performances or being involved in the performances if they're more if they involve people getting involved directly. I do lots of quite ritualistic performances. A lot of my performances involve bloodletting and costumes, and I also use hook suspensions and piercing. Um, it's for me. I think a lot of it is kind of creating my own myth.
Speaking of your audience, how would you characterize your typical audience that either comes to your performances or, like you said, occasionally participates, depending on what you're doing?
I feel really lucky because I have quite an eclectic group of spaces that I perform in. I also work in cabaret, so it really depends on the spaces that I'm in. I'm very lucky that London has a really good following for live art performers,
Yeah.
and within those spaces, it's it can be quite mixed, but it's quite it's people who aren't necessarily aware of the occult kind of like ideas and magical kind of ideas behind some things, but they have an interest from quite a liberal perspective in people doing in different things with their bodies and different art practices. So you end up with quite a kind of politically aware queer audience, which works really well for my practices. But it's mixed. I also performed in Pakistan, and it was I was at there was in Karachi, they had the first Biennale of performance art there. Well, not of performance art, the first Biennale of art out there. And I was lucky enough to be invited to perform. And, all these people in England are kind of saying, oh, are you going to be safe going to Pakistan? I don't know about that. And I was saying, no, it's going to be fine. And actually I had people's like aunts come over and be like that. And I was bleeding on roses. And people's like aunts came over and said that was beautiful.
Oh wow!
So it's really nice when you take. I get kind of like uniquely surprised every time I bring it to a different sphere. Like I performed in Venice and Paris and LA and New York with the live art stuff, and every time it excites me to have people who don't know my work come and see it. And they don't. I think when you describe when one describes the sort of things I do, then it can be read as kind of extreme and aggressive and scary. But actually, when I'm performing it, it's like some of the ideas people have around the occult and witchcraft. They go, "Oh, it's things that I don't know. That must be scary and shocking." And actually, what we're doing is just alternative ways of engaging with our bodies or spirituality. And I think they can see that when they see it in person.
I really like that the comparison that you just made there. I think that is really fitting. And I am going to get a little bit later more in detail with some of your art pieces. Is that the proper way to term them? Yeah, but there's a couple that I wrote down that I want to talk to you about that just stood out to me on your Instagram. But before we get there, I just want to ask you how you got into everything that you do. Because I mean, I wonder, I guess, does it come from, or did it start from an occult interest place, or did it start from a performance art place, or did you just fall into it?
I think that's a really great question. I feel really lucky that I kind of got into magic in a kind of loose sense. I've always been quite intuitive with what I do and not very book focused. And I got into bits of magic and ritual kind of through just little, one of those silly little spell a day books when I was like a teenager and I was having a really hard time. Just like I think a lot of people in the West who find magic, at the moment.
New Age, yeah.
And so I found that, and I was really excited by this way of being empowered by engaging with things and having these actions you could do that would make things better in some way, or whether that's psychologically or spiritually, energetically, and kind of engaging with that idea of energy and things like that. And so it wasn't until much later that I kind of combined that with my interests in live art and performance and art. It wasn't till kind of I got till I was about 16 studying art, and then I went to art school in London. I went to Central St Martin's, and it wasn't I didn't find out about performance art. I didn't know that existed until I was kind of like 16 or so. And at first I was really intrigued. I'd kind of found out about people like Lee Bowery and Marina Abramovich. And then I found out about people like Cherie Rose and Bob Flanagan and Ron Ainsley, and all these people were doing these, and Genesis Peorage, and people doing these really exciting things. And I think Genesis is a really good person to think about, if in regards to kind of like magic and performance art crossover, and especially kind of from an English perspective. So it's finding these people and going, oh, so you've been doing things that I've been doing, but you're doing it in a different way, and you're doing it in a way that's within an art space, and that really excited me.
Yeah. So speaking of some of the art, I feel there was a couple that were really compelling to me, and then there's a couple that I think more obviously that I feel like we should just talk about.
Yeah,
Um, one of the ones that really stood out for me, I think it was called Growth, with the stapled roses.
yeah.
Could you just give a brief description of that, for the people listening?
Yeah, so I come back to a lot of visual themes, like repeated as themes within my work. One of these is white roses or roses in general. And so growth sits as part of my Femme Fakir collection of pieces. That's like an ongoing, growing collection of work. Um, and I performed it last September in Los Angeles, with my collaborator Rhiannon Aarons, and she's an LA-based artist. And it was a long durational performance of about an hour and a half or 2 hours, in which I lie on black dirt, like a kind of funeral mound on the ground, and Rihanna, and there's red and white roses around my body that Rihanna brings in. And she then takes the rose petals, the white rose petals, and staples them all over my body. And so I'm become covered with all these rose petals. Um, and then she slowly removes all the rose petals and feeds them to me. Um, and it was a really long piece. It took a long amount of time to as a piece. The thing I quite like is things that don't have a time-based duration. It's not like, and we'll do this for an hour. It's like, okay, we do this until all the rose petals have been eaten.
Right. There's no time limit, no time, right?
Yeah.
That's cool. Now, I guess, do you practice for this kind of thing beforehand, or is it truly in the moment, that's when it happens?
With the performance, most of the performances that I do, especially the ones that involve piercing or bloodletting or hook suspension, can't really rehearse that. And so we didn't, for example, sometimes you bleed more than others. And for me, the blood is part of the aesthetic, and the symbology and everything else. But
Right.
there's times where we've finished a performance and we're like, shit, she didn't bleed enough.
More blood next time.
Sometimes it's luck, sometimes it's just depends on the heat and the way your body is and how deep or shallow what you're doing is. It's all these practical things, but it's I still think so. Yeah, we can't. I choose not to rehearse these. I think for me, that's part of the ritual. It's it's not a stage performance. It's live art, it's ritualistic live art. So it's the importance is it happening here and now with real actions, real pain, real blood, real roses, etc. So I think that having it happen organically in front of the audience makes a real difference to me than if I was to kind of stage it more theatrically.
Another one that kind of, I'm not sure which, I don't know which one this was called, but Bleeding Skirt.
Blood skirt.
Yeah, can you talk about that one a little bit? Because that one was also very visually compelling.
Thank you. So Bleeding Skirt, I performed as part of Tempting Failures Biennale of Performance Art and Noise in London. That was a couple of years ago. It's a 7-hour piece.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's the longest piece I've done. And I collected, I had my own blood collected before the piece, and I walk in a circle within the gallery space, the circumference of the gallery space, and as I walk, the skirt is designed so that it bleeds my own blood. And so as I walk, I leave these bloody footprints that kind of grow and grow and create this line, and then it's this red circle that I'm creating by walking slowly. And I was booked to do it for the duration of the day, so that was a 7-hour piece.
Wow. Yeah, it was I couldn't stop looking at it, to be totally honest. And then I think one that definitely we should talk about, the oil slick mermaid. That was the big, like, I think that was the hook suspension one that, like, I really saw on there that I was like, oh wow, okay, we should talk about this.
Yeah, that's great. So that piece is called Seabirth, and I perform it in cabaret spaces generally, and I've used spaces such as Torture Garden, and there's also a nightclub in London here called Antichrist. So I performed
that's
there.
Cool.
It's very cool. You would
That's
like
great.
Antichrist.
Wow.
And so within that performance, I start being kind of pulled onto stage in a black latex mermaid tail, and I'm wrapped in plastic and rope, and I have a metal skewer that pierces my cheeks in one side and out the other. I've got 2 meat hooks already in my back, and my co-performer, who's dressed as a sailor, pulls the spear out of my face and kind of hooks me up from the hooks to a suspension rig, and then I'm suspended above the audience, and I kind of come to life up there, and I kind of spin around, and then and then I kind of die again. So it's the idea is it's the dying breath of an oil slick mermaid.
I just wanted to point out that you also dabble in at least a little bit of SFX makeup, right?
Yeah, little bits of special effects makeup.
Yeah, in particular, I really liked your albino vampire bat situation.
Thank you. That was how I was keeping myself entertained in lockdown.
Oh yeah, what a better time to practice.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so I guess I want to kind of transition with that in mind into more of like nailing down more about the like intersection between like the occult and your performance art. So how would you say that your art creates like a space to have that kind of intersection of like body and spirit?
I think for me, a lot of the performance things that I get interested and excited about doing, a lot of it is just driven by an idea that excites me about something that I can do as an experience. A lot of it is chasing the ecstatic experience, and that comes from a lot of kind of historic and rituals, and I think there's a lot of within different religious practices and occult practices are kind of embracing pain and pushing the body as a way of kind of like breaking through to other headspaces, and or doing performances or blood offerings as ritual practice, as a way of doing invocation, or as a way of kind of giving offerings to god, goddess energies, whatever kind of suits your own kind of practices and palette, really. So it does depend from performance to performance, but some of them have been. I also, I feel like my work couldn't exist if the modern primitives movement hadn't existed, and so I feel like the new generation of that. So for me, doing things like hook suspensions or hook pulls and piercing my face and piercing rose petals to my face, I have this real interest in kind of more doing these rituals that are led by a more female directed energy, and I think there's like a real interest. Like I find that really exciting as a kind of crossover space between like feminine energy and this kind of this practice and this idea of kind of like things that people would consider shocking. I don't choose to do works that I don't choose actions because they are shocking, but I'm aware that my work is shocking for some people. But I think sometimes people, when they see things they're not used to, they experience this shock and they see the body being used in ways that they're not used to, and they're shocked. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes a shock can be a jolt from one reality to another. So I think it can be really exciting space, and whether or not people react in a positive way. There is often this tendency that women aren't the ones who go through pain rituals, because historically women, women are already going to have to go through the ritual of bleeding through menstruation. They're also, you don't want to risk putting women in dangerous situations because you need women, because you need children. And so I feel like I'm very lucky to be in this modern space where I can choose to do what I do with my body. And so for me, engaging with my body in this way is, quite an exciting radical thing, to be able to kind of push my body and my my spirituality and my headspace through doing these kind of extreme actions.
I guess I want to talk more about how like physical pain or just discomfort kind of play a role in the spiritual component of your work.
Yeah, so I think there's whole histories outside of live art practices of using pain within spirituality or tribal practice or ritual practice. And that's always really excited me, just like as a concept. And I do really, those chemicals and those spiritual spaces that are awoken through those things are things that I'm always driving towards and I'm very interested in, and kind of sharing that space with people, especially when they're kind of coming to a work that they thought might be challenging, and they're seeing that it's quite a peaceful or transcendental experience. I think that's really exciting to share that with people. I have a piece that I did launch last year that's very ritualistic hook suspension, and but it's also very joyful, and it's really exciting because people are very used to kind of like these things being kind of very somber, but like laughter has also been really not necessarily, it's not comedic, but still, like joyousness, ecstatic ritual. It's joyous. It's not always, not all my work is joyous, but that piece is really exciting to let the audience kind of like howl with you.
Yeah, for sure.
And they don't have these spaces. You were talking about pain. And so I think that kind of, for me, it's coming to these spaces with the edges of my body and kind of things that I'd never think I could have done with my body, and pushing myself into those spaces. It's a way of kind of exploring the boundaries of where my mind goes with these experiences. And it's similar in a sense to when people are doing BDSM. And
Yeah, that's kind of what I've been thinking about a little bit as you've been talking.
yeah. And so for those who are less BDSM savvy, that's bondage, domination, and sadomasochism. And that can involve people submitting and doing painful things or experiencing painful things within a consensual space. And if somebody is in that space, there can be experiences which are quite tranquil, moving past the pain, and that's called subspace. And it's quite meditative. It's the space that you might have felt if you run a lot and you get to that bit where you're like, I don't like running, fuck this, oh no, the adrenaline. And then the adrenaline hits you, and suddenly you're like, actually, this is great, I'm really enjoying it. Or weightlifting. There's acceptable spaces where people can get these same kind of adrenaline or kind of pain-based experiences. But I guess BDSM and these kind of more ritualistic body practices or bloodletting are kind of the spaces that are less accepted, where people can engage with that.
And I think that kind of leads into an interesting question of just How do the people, I guess, in your life feel about what you do? Is it generally, do you have a lot of support, or is it something that's kind of hard to explain to people? Do you kind of wait to explain to people what you do?
I feel really lucky because I've been really open about what I do in my interests for a very long time. And I've also because my day job is cabaret and I used to run nightclubs, I'm in a space
Oh,
where I'm already dealing with kind of alternative people.
I see.
Um, and I also feel quite lucky that I'm quite happy to explain things a bit. And even my mum, like, she might not want to come and see me do a hook suspension, but she kind of gets it. She's not from that kind of headspace. But I think if you can kind of calmly sit down with somebody and explain, well, if you think about the fact that the monks used to flog themselves, there are histories of these people engaging in different things to get to these spaces. And I think either some people understand it from a performance art perspective and like, oh yes, I get what you're saying. It's very feminist. I like it. Or they might like it from an aesthetic point of view, or they might like it from the kind of idea of what I'm doing. And a lot of people like they get that whole, suffer for your art. It's a phrase. So
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
get that a lot. So um, I think I'm quite lucky that I choose to kind of exist in spaces that are open minded and kind of queerer in regards to like ideas of what people can do with their bodies.
that's awesome. Any goals or crazy, dream
Oh, I have so
projects that
many.
you just like are dying to do?
I have so many. I have a whole art piece that I've been like sending around spaces, which is specifically about uh, the witchcraft trials, and it's a
Oh, wow.
whole kind of like memorial piece that I'm sure I will make happen one day. And that would be a long project, but in with a big fiery finish.
Yeah,
Um, just like all the best witches.
of course. Of course.
um, at the moment, I'm focusing on my cabaret work and hoping that the nightclubs reopen, and then slowly I'll be able to start making more performance actions again. But in the meantime, I'm doing lots of research, enjoying reading up on blood rituals and symbolism and
Yeah.
all the occult books that I've been neglecting because I've been performing too much.
Well, perfect time. You gotta get, do all your research now, so that way when we're
Exactly.
good.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's actually a perfect place for you to literally plug anything and everything that you want to plug right now. Just go for it.
Great. Thank you, Olivia. So, if you found my work interesting, you can find more of it on Instagram as Amy Kingsmill. You can also find me on Patreon and Facebook under the same thing, Amy Kingsmill. And I hope to connect with you on those platforms.
All right, who's up next?
Henry.
Henry. And what's Henry's claim to fame?
He is a tattoo artist, although he doesn't really tattoo right now, he told me, but he also does like prints, he does like graphic stuff, he does like he like carves or paints on wood and stuff too.
Now, when you say he doesn't tattoo right now, you mean because it's difficult to get closer than 6 feet to somebody right now, right?
Partially, but I think he just kind of insinuated that he hasn't been tattooing as much. But it probably
Yeah.
is partially because of COVID, but I think it's also maybe like a just like where his career is currently at, but yeah.
Henry's been a long time connected to us on the old Instagram. I love looking at his stuff when he posts. It's all really cool. I like the vibe.
Yeah, it's like a lot of different occulty references intersecting. There's not
And
really.
indigenous art, lots of different stuff, right?
Yeah, he's got like anything from like Greek gods and Egyptian to I've seen a reptilian, a mushroom Jesus, you name it.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so I have Henry here with me. Hello, Henry.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Pretty good.
Good. So I guess really let's just start with telling the people who you are. Let's throw some pronouns out there just to be safe and where you're from.
Henry Hablack. I live in Philadelphia. He.
Cool. I love Philadelphia. I lived there
Yeah.
for a hot second. It's a cool place. Go ahead and describe your work to the listeners too, because unfortunately this is all on the digital airwaves. So,
Oh yeah, no problem. I'm most well known for my tattoo work, even though I don't really tattoo that much anymore. But a lot of my stuff is just, all my themes and imagery is mostly to do with the occult and just like the history of it, and um, just everything like about it is pretty much drenched in my work. That's what it's like all about. I started studying it probably 5, 6 years ago, pretty heavily, and yeah, ever since then I just been putting it in everything.
and how would you characterize then the audience for your work?
I would say people that are probably interested in something that's a little kind of weird or unique, um, something different. Even though
Yeah.
I think it's like this stuff is like getting a little like it's kind of more and more popular. I've noticed it in like everything lately, honestly, in the last like
Mm.
few years. Like every Netflix show has to do with like some demon summoning.
Unsolved.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, which is cool. I just think it's pretty funny though, because it's supposed to be like the secret. Which I mean, I'm doing the same thing. I'm kind of like I got interested in the stuff, and then I wanted to share the stuff that I was learning, and so I
hmm
just kept putting it into my work, and I was getting not only a good response, but I was so interested in what I was doing, and it was so interesting because it's almost like the hidden history of, um, everything basically.
For sure.
Yeah.
So I know you said you kind of got into it like 6 years ago, I think you said.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to say on like how specifically you got into it?
I had a series of experiences. I mean, I was always kind of interested in like the weird. I always listened to like kind of music that was kind of like different, but I didn't really know like how to categorize this stuff when I was growing up. Like, um, until I had a few friends that were kind of using this sort of similar imagery, and I was like, what is all this stuff? Like metaphysical kind
Mm.
of stuff. And then I kind of like leaned into the occult, um, and I just started studying like really in depth like the like mystery tradition and like initiation, and especially like hermeticism. I actually noticed you guys just did an episode on hermeticism, which is funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I mean that stuff is like drenched in like the whole, like alchemy, the
hmm
mysteries, um, you know, um, Orpheism, Dionysus, and like the Eleusinian mysteries, like all that stuff. I think is just like it's kind of drenched in um, almost a lot of the symbolism that you see today. You know.
Do you want to talk a little bit just about like the influence, I guess, of like indigenous cultures on your work?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, that's another huge influence as well because I'm just studying like I love studying ancient history. So I just
I can definitely tell just
yeah.
looking at your work. It really shows. Yeah.
So yeah, so I like finding the similarities between all these people because I feel like they were all kind of saying the same thing, just through like a
Mm.
different kind of cultural lens.
hmm
And I'm interested in the origins of like religion and where all this stuff came from, really, because the farther and farther you go back, you notice that the symbols become more and more similar, and everybody's kind of on the same page with what they're doing, and it's all sort of this like astro theology, right? And then
Mm.
later you get like sun worship kind of comes in, um, and that's what I like how it relates to sort of like Greek mythology and South American mythology, and pretty much all these mythologies kind of have the same stories in like a different kind of way of saying it, like specific to their culture, But
hmm
but meanwhile, they're all actually talking about the same thing. They have like the rate like stories about the ages of people, cataclysms that destroyed their societies, and then basically teachers that came and taught them civilization and everything, and that's what eventually became these gods or entities, whatever they were. Something taught them, and they're all talking about the same thing.
Mm-hmm. I guess riffing off of that, and you've said some of it, but I guess exactly like what mythologies do inspire you and why. You've said some like Greek, you've and I've seen like so much in your work. Like I mean, you had anything from one of my favorites, which was Mushroom Jesus,
Oh yeah.
to like you had a really cool Hermes tattoo that you did. You had like the one of the tower that was like really cool. And then I think I even, and maybe I'm wrong, but I thought I saw a reptilian
Oh yeah.
at one point,
Yeah, there was a
which was
reptile there, probably.
that was a joy to me. So these are just like, I don't know, all different kinds of like mythologies that you're riffing off of. So I don't know if you wanted to say anything about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, I think it's just whatever I'm kind of studying at the moment. It could just like kind of goes in my work. I haven't studied Eastern religions as extensively just because I don't know that much about them. But I'd like to. I know like certain things. And I know they have some of the similar stories too. Like the first, like everybody's always talks about like these serpent teachers at the very beginning of their creations. So I just like
Right.
finding these different things that are similar between all these different cultures, really.
And I'm gonna switch gears a little bit to tattooing again.
Okay.
Are there any? Would you say there's any like spiritual components to tattooing for you personally?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, all these things are like power symbols too. So depending on the level of belief that you have in whatever you're getting on you, I feel like it's probably means more to certain people. But I think just the act
Mm.
of getting tattooed is kind of a magical act because it's a transformative alchemical kind of process.
I
Um,
agree for sure. I think definitely anytime I've gotten a tattoo, I think I go into a little bit of a trance, a
Yeah.
little bit, you
Yeah,
know.
totally. Yeah, it's definitely like that's one of the techniques people are using, right? To have these experiences is like body modification or like exposure or whatever.
Hmm.
Go to a place where you're not usually at. We'll take your brain usually somewhere different as well.
And even there might be something to the pain of it too, I think a little bit, but
Oh, for
you
sure.
know.
Yeah, especially if you're sitting for like a long time, in horrible spots. It's not fun.
Oh yeah, like like an 8 hour straight is
That's a lot. Yeah.
yeah. Would you say that there's a difference between your art as a print and then as a tattoo?
Yeah, definitely. Because when I'm designing for tattoos, it's kind of a different medium, I feel like, than like paper. I can kind of take my time and do like these different layers and stuff and techniques. And a tattoo, I feel like you have one shot with this person usually, because I'm usually doing something that I can finish in a few hours. So you got to kind of figure out I mean, well, for me anyway, is what's the most like economical way to do this thing where it's going to heal and look like it does for the longest time.
Mm,
Because tattooing is like the color fades black, like once it leaves you, like all this stuff can happen. You know what I mean? The person has to heal it, and then they walk around with it. It's in the sun for years. So if you
right.
don't know like how to do these certain things that'll make your tattoo age nicely, it's gonna might not look that great in just a few years. So
Mm.
there's definitely things I can't do in tattoos that I do with my paintings.
And this is just a fun question for me, but do you have any tattoos personally that you would say were like spiritual for you?
I mean, I feel like that's kind of like a almost like a personal grimoire of like my life. You know what I mean? Because it's like
For sure.
everything that certain. I look at something and I can remember where I was, who did it,
Mm,
how I kind of felt that day. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like
yeah.
a journal that's like more personal than just having a photograph or something, because it's like with you forever. And it'll always kind of invoke that moment. Even like if you don't see something that's on like the back of your leg somewhere for a while, like, oh yeah, I remember that day when I got that with my buddy and we were doing this and that. And I think that's what a lot of magic is just certain symbols that evoke emotions or feelings, right?
Yeah. I think that is like a great sentiment to honestly end this on. Yeah, I think that kind of wrapped everything up. Um, this is your chance now, Henry, to go ahead and plug anything and everything on Earth that you would like to. and go?
I have a website. It's henryhablack.com. My last name is spelled Hablak, and Instagram is HHABLAK. I'm not currently tattooing at the moment, but I probably will be just once all this craziness, when we figure stuff out. Who knows? But I'm always making art and selling prints online. I have a ton of stuff on there. Most of my work lately has to deal with a lot of like shamanism themes, but I have stuff, a ton of different stuff and all different occult subjects. I mean, I did a sweatshirt about John Dee one time.
Oh, he's coming up. We're doing him soon.
Yeah, so just probably a lot of stuff that your listeners might be interested in. They could probably find something on my website. That Mushroom Jesus, that's one of my favorites. That was a really good one. I love
that one.
Yeah. Did you guys do anything on John Allegro, the guy who wrote that book, The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross?
No, but I kind of read a tiny bit into him when I did like my DMT Machine Elf episode. He did come across a little bit, but I didn't get too crazy into that.
Cool. Yeah, I studied, like, a lot of my work is about that, basically all these different cultures and what kind of like their initiatory experiences to basically get to these other realms or whatever they were doing. And that's basically what they were studying too, like that's what his book is about.
Yeah, I definitely agree. All of our listeners, definitely check out one of the best websites I've seen in a while too, by the way. It was just a really nice website.
Oh, thank you.
But yeah, definitely check out Henry.
My wife made the website, by the way. I'm going to plug her right there. So.
Oh, well, fantastic.
Yeah, so everybody needs a website. Hit her up.
Nice. Great.
Next up, we have Nikki.
Yeah, Nikki.
Longtime friend of the podcast. Now, Nikki, unlike Henry and Amy, is new. She's new. She's a new person. She's young, is what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
I'm sure they're both young. What am I trying to say here? Nikki is a new artist. She's an up-and-coming artist in the wide world, and she identifies as an actor mostly. Is that right?
Yeah, she does. Although we didn't talk about her acting too much. We mostly talked about she does collage art. But we actually talked a lot about how she kind of does it mostly for her. She's not really at that point of like mass producing her art or anything like that.
So collage is kind of self-exploration. I'm sure that feeds her process as an actor as well. I mean,
it's all emotion.
Self-exploration's key.
Yeah, it's all emotion driven for Nikki.
That's interesting. All right, well, let's have a listen.
Yeah, my name's Nikki. I'm good with her. Doesn't really mean much to me. Gender doesn't mean much to me at all, but I'll go by her. That's good with me. Yeah, I'm from Manitoba, Canada. Yeah, I know Canada sounds like a really peaceful place, but the city I live in is actually dubbed the murder capital of Canada.
Yeah, you were just telling me that your drug dealer problem, well, not your drug dealer problem, but, your neighbor drug dealer problem.
Yeah, they're the worst drug dealers. They're so not discreet, and they're just always shouting. Like, always shouting.
Wow. That gives you a little atmosphere about where Nikki's creating art. So go ahead and describe your work to the listeners, because we can't actually show them your art because this is over the digital sound waves. So go ahead and just describe what you do.
So I had an issue with this at first because I was thinking work as in make money from something, but I don't make money from my art.
Okay, I feel that.
Yeah, so for me, it's more about, it's very personal. My art is very much about collaging, so taking different things and different mediums and putting them together. It's a lot about taking old things I already have and, transforming them so I like them again. So I'll take apart old bracelets and necklaces and make new ones for myself. I'll melt old candles and make new ones for myself. I have a ridiculous amount of magazines and comic books that destroyed.
Yeah, I definitely picked up on a lot of I guess there was some 90s meets comics meets a little bit of horror even in some of your collage work.
Yeah, and how they all happen is so I have a bunch of pre-cut out things Like I go through and I'll cut out like a whole bag basically full of things, and then depending on kind of a headspace I'm in, I'll pick through the things I have, and different things will draw my attention. So I'm naturally really bad at understanding my own emotions. So I use art as a way to get it all out of my head and onto paper, so then I can look at it at a later point and kind of understand the headspace I was in at the time, even if I didn't really know what I was going through at the time, if that makes any sense.
No, I love that. It's almost like a visual journal of how you've been feeling, but without actually writing down your words, I guess.
Yeah, I have a really hard time putting my emotions into words. So art for me has always just been like the only really good way of expressing myself, like the only way of expressing myself that actually feels productive.
How did you like get into doing what like collage work in general? I know you said that you like taking old things and making them new, but I feel like collaging, that's pretty specific.
Yeah, for me it's the like destroying of the old and the making of the new from it. So I really like ripping apart magazines and cutting them apart, and that stemmed from when I was a kid. I've always had anxiety issues since I was really little, and a lot of different mental health issues. And so I used to rip up newspapers, read them by hand. And so then someone gave me a bunch of old calendars and magazines. I was probably like 4. And I actually have the first ever collage I made from when I was like 4. It's just like 4 pictures taped to a different picture.
Oh, wow. That's so neat, though, that you have that.
Yeah, it's just always come really like naturally to me. Like you put scraps in front of me and I'm like, okay.
Oh, no, I love that, though. That's really like taking kind of something that I guess was kind of inconvenient and making it's a theme in your art. It's a whole thing. That's really cool. You are, like I said, young artist, just like kind of just trying to make your way in the world, like we all are. It's a difficult thing to do. So I guess I want to know, what role does like your spirituality play like in this phase of your journey, so to speak?
Well, I would say just because for me my art is so like emotionally, like it's so tied to my emotion. And so it really is like a spiritual practice for me. When I get really overwhelmed, I'm a very hands-on person. I have to be busy in order to distract my mind, like physically busy. So when I get really stressed out or really bummed out or really anxious, I just turn to art. And so it's like I can't meditate because I'm so hyperactive, but I can sit down for like 7 hours and pick through magazine clippings.
I really identify that with that as someone that gets pretty manic. I have the same thing for sure. What does success mean to you?
I think success to me would be being able to make things that are personal and still share them fearlessly, because like the art I put on my Instagram, that's a very tame, more artsy side of my art and less of the like emotional part of it. But when I do show the more emotional art to my friends, I always get really, really good responses from it. I just never think other people would want to see it because it's so personal to me.
Yeah.
But if I could come to a place where I'm, you know, willing to show my like true art, I feel like that would be a starting point of success for me.
I really like that. Turning a little bit, we've been focusing, I guess I've been focusing more on your collage work, but you also are an actor, correct?
Yeah.
I guess I want to ask the same thing that I kind of asked about your other art, where like, how does your spirituality come into your work as an actor at all?
Yeah. So with acting, it's very emotional. You have to tap into a lot of deep emotion and like relate it to whatever your character is going through. I started acting very young. I started doing like church musicals.
Yes, I love that.
And my mom said the first time I got applause, my face just like lit up.
Yes.
Addicted to it. But no, I really like being able to step into someone else's shoes, and find your own ways to relate to that character. And it's just, for me, acting is just the most involved way of telling a story. And I really, really love that. And I think that that can be a very spiritual thing for me, because again, anything that brings me more in touch with myself is very spiritual to me, because that's my biggest struggle.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to know a little bit, do you want to speak more on like specifically like where your spirituality or your occultism like personally like lies?
Yeah, that I think is really, it started really young for me also. So my dad passed away when I was 3. And then...
Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, it's not okay, but like it happened.
I get it, yeah.
There's been a lot of death and a lot of loss in my life. And so my spirituality really stems from that, because I've really had to ask the tough questions and look for the deeper answers. So I tried out Christianity and very quickly realized that it was not made for women.
Yeah. No, I totally, I get your point. You don't worry.
Growing up, my brother, he's transgender, so he's female to male, so he's male now. So I grew up in a very like LGBT friendly home, and my brother at the time was a pagan, and his girlfriend was a pagan, and really had all of this information at a really young age to pick from. I got my first tarot deck when I was 10, because I was trying to play with my brothers, and he was like, no, get your own. So he bought me my own. I still have it. Yeah, so I've just been way more into the mystic spiritual side of things and not so much the structured religion. But if I had to pick like a religion, I would say that I'm a witch, you know?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think, yeah, I like to leave it there, I think, at this point in my life too. I feel that. I think there's a lot of pressure within like the witchcraft community from a lot of people to kind of nail down what it is to be a witch, and I just don't think you can really do that anymore. I think you can just be a witch.
Well, that's what I like about it, is it's so like not general. Like it's so specific to each individual person who practices it. And I feel like that's what a lot of religion, like structured religions, lack. It's like, you are your own connection to the divine. You know, you are your own source of power. Things like that. That's what I really like and believe in.
Well, and that directly plays into, like you said, with being an actor and that, you know, that source of power. How does occultism, I guess, specifically come up as themes or inform your collage work?
So, after my father passed away when I was about 5, like 2 years after he passed away, I started hearing a male voice that it became very apparent to me no one else could hear. And it presented itself to me as my fairy godfather. And would just ask about my day and how I am and all of that. And then, you know, really quickly, a bad psychiatrist told me that I was just looking for attention and it wasn't real. And that really messed with me.
That's very devalidating. I mean, especially as a kid.
Oh, yeah. So I was like, okay, well, I'm just making it up. Can't trust myself then. So that's kind of fueled my whole trying to get back in touch with my emotions. I feel like they were just so shut down, and all my intuition and this talent to communicate with the dead. That sounds so insane, but I have proof.
No, it doesn't sound crazy here.
So, you know, when you're younger and you don't understand that names can be shortened. So my dad's name was Len, and that's all I knew. And I didn't know that his name was short for Leonard. So one day I asked the voice what its name was, and it said Leonard. And I didn't connect the two at all, but I told my brother. And my brother just goes like white as a sheet. And he's like, that's your dad's name. I'm like, no, it's not, stupid. His name is Len. Like, I'm like 4 or 5.
Right.
And
oh my gosh.
it ended up really scaring me at one point. And I said, like, you're scaring me. You have to stop. And the response I got was like, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. And then my brother would keep having dreams with my dad in them, and I wouldn't. So my brother in his dream was like, hey, why don't you visit Nikki? She really misses you. And he said, I don't want to scare her.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's a little bit of a double-edged sword there.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That's a really roundabout way of saying that, like, all of my art is a way to get back to my intuition and my emotion and all that stuff I feel has been shut down throughout the years.
Would you say that you go into a kind of trance then when you're like in the process of like ripping those magazines up and like doing
concept of time? I like 3 hours later and like a pile of magazine clippings. Like I don't even have a garbage with me. I just like onto my couch, cut stuff up. It's everywhere.
No, that's incredible though. So did you just eventually, he never, showed back up in your dreams at all? Did you ever regain any kind of contact?
No. However, other people have heard a disembodied male voice yell my name. Like, I haven't heard it, but my roommate, we were in the car and we were about to get a flat tire. And I knew. I have very good intuition. And so I knew something was wrong. And so I, like, don't want to freak my roommate out, but I'm like, oh, bracing myself. And then my roommate goes, did you hear that? I'm like, no, hear what? She says, I just heard a male voice yell Nikki. And then boom, we got a flat tire.
Oh, wow. Wow, you have, well, it seems like you have a little bit of a guardian at least,
It's, yeah. And like I said,
that's incredible.
Quite a few people to pass away, unfortunately. So I'd say I have a pretty strong connection to some of the dead, at least.
Yeah. I mean, for sure, I think that makes total sense. The more you experience that kind of thing, of course, especially from a young age, the closer I think you're just going to be naturally inclined towards it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just such a constant, reoccurring, thing. It's like, okay, well, I could tell myself this isn't real and make myself feel insane, or, accept the possibility that it's possible. I mean, my basic view of the world is I'm never gonna know. Like, I'm never gonna know the truth. I'm at peace with that. I don't need to.
And it unfortunately brings up a lot of, I think in a lot of occult community, like circles, you don't want to bring up mental illness because it kind of devalidates, what could be the occult. So I don't know, but then also at the same time going to that, the older thinking therapist who just completely devalidates the kid who's, saying these kind of things. It's just very interesting to me. Yeah. This has been a very interesting conversation.
I'm glad. And yeah, on that note, I do actually suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. My previous partner, passed away about 3 years ago, I think now.
I'm sorry.
And so that kind of triggered PTSD in me. So then I started hearing and seeing things that weren't there, but it's different because I know they're not there.
I 100% know what you mean.
There's a different feeling between like, oh, I got a chill, and like there's a flashing light in the corner of my eye, but I know there's nothing there.
Yeah. And I it's funny you say that because when I went through a loss myself 2 years ago, I definitely also, because I suffer from mental illness, had to have that moment of, okay, well, I've known what the paranormal is for sure, but now, like, am I hearing things? Am I seeing things? Like, it does, I don't know, it is really interesting.
Yeah, it's confusing at first, but I feel like I've come to a place where I can tell the difference.
Yeah. And I think that's valid. And unfortunately, other people might not see it that way.
Oh, yeah.
But
absolutely. But I don't really care anymore.
Yeah. I mean, fuck it. Fuck them.
I just I don't care anymore. And what other people think of me is none of my business anyway.
I want to give you the opportunity now to just like plug to death anything at all that you want to plug to the people, any projects, any pages, just go for it.
Okay. So my Instagram is _Nixie, which is NIXIE _dust _ and then my art Instagram is at a little bit of Nixie dust. I mostly just make art for myself, but if anyone ever wanted anything custom made by me, like I would be more than happy to make things for other people too. I was just so excited to get to talk to you. I can't even I'm, not to be a fangirl, but do you guys have fangirls? Because I'm a fangirl.
Oh, well, we literally, Rob and I were like, we have to. She's one of the ones that we have to do just because you've been an OG. I mean, since I can remember, you've been around. So, that made me so happy. Oh my gosh.
I'm so excited. I normally wouldn't respond to something like this, but I was like, okay, no, this is your chance. You're such a fan.
Aww.
Get to talk to them. It's so cool.
Well, I'm really glad that you shared everything with us, and I just loved this.
And last but certainly not least, we have another up-and-coming artist. So we had two artists at the beginning who are established in their career, and we have two artists sort of getting their career started to do the second half of the episode. And I'm talking about Flora now. And Flora is a poet?
Yes, she's a writer, poet. Mostly poetry. A lot of...
Very cool.
She does have some occulty themes, but a lot of it is she'll have dreams and write poems about that, just whatever she encounters. So.
And she's from one of my favorite countries on earth. She's Scottish, right?
Yeah, her heritage is actually really interesting because she's Mexican Scottish. So there's a lot of culture going.
Very cool. All right, let's have a listen to Flora.
Yeah.
Okay, so my name is Flora. I use she, her pronouns. And I'm from Scotland. I'm very proud to be from Scotland, as I think many Scottish people are. And and I don't know, I'm studying English literature and philosophy.
Oh, wow.
I'm very interested in the sort of old occult sort of writing and charlatans and the real people as well. So yeah, I'm just really fascinated by that.
Yeah, so describe your work actually a little bit. I think that leans in right into what you're saying.
So, I mean, I mostly write poetry. I've basically written ever since I was really small. So a lot of nonsense poetry, stuff that's very silly, like Edward Lear. But I mean, it ranges. I did a sort of Spencerian, so the Fairy Queen. I don't know if you've ever heard. It's a really long poem, and it's very, filled with fairies and wizards and stuff. It's really cool, really interesting.
Yeah.
I recommend it. So yeah, it really varies from longer things around maybe 10 pages long to just small poems. And I try and write short stories, but my attention span is really not long enough.
Yeah. So how would you characterize your audience then?
So, I post things on my blog online and I think my friends like it, but it's difficult to find an audience when you're just writing poetry. If I'm satisfied with a piece of work, then I mean, it'll go up on my blog, and it's not the most fancy stuff. And I also hate redrafting, but yeah, and it's writing, you get into that sort of state where I do quite a lot of what's it called? Flow writing, when you
automatic writing.
Automatic writing, yeah. So I try and do.
I was gonna ask you about that.
Yeah, because I think the most interesting things come up from your subconscious when you're dreaming. I like writing about things based on dreams as well. I think that's an interesting project to try and recall that and make it actually readable and logical.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I appreciate that because I can't remember I struggle to remember my dreams for sure.
Yeah, it helps to write them down. I've got notes on my phone that's just filled with just really rambling things that don't make sense, but they're you can kind of take some inspiration from them because they're so weird.
I kind of want to talk about your heritage, because I think it comes up, not like like I think like quite a bit, like in your work that I was reading.
Mhm.
So how would you say that your cultural background informs your work?
That's a really interesting question because my mum's Mexican, so I have like that whole side which I'm really really interested in, and then I have my whole Scottish side, and they both are such amazing cultures for like myths and sort of legends and tales, and the Mayans as well. Such an interesting culture, and they just their art and their beliefs. I think that really, I'm so fascinated. I want to go back to Mexico and visit more pyramids because they're such amazing. They're very otherworldly as well.
Yeah.
And I feel like you can get the same kind of feeling maybe in Scotland when you're climbing up a mountain. You get this amazing feeling from their strangeness as well. I don't know if I'm making sense.
No, you are.
Okay.
No, I'm down with everything you're saying. I'm totally following you.
Yeah, no, it's great, and yeah. So the myths and legends, like in Scotland, I just feel like there's so many. The stories of the little people. They're very sort of prevalent, and you get selkies, the women who turn into seals, and I don't know. I just think they're really beautiful stories.
I think and it's such a like contrast to, I think, being here in America. um I think the way that we approach that kind of thing is very different. Our history comes from, being more scared of that kind of
Mm.
more mythological, supernatural, so to speak, stuff. So does that at all then influence, like, either any part of your heritage then influence your spirituality?
Well, a little bit. I know. So in the Highlands, there was a big tradition for women to have what was it? Like second sight. So that was like a really commonplace thing there. And I don't think I have second sight. I think I'd love to have second sight. But I think my great grandmother may have been like a clairvoyant. She was from Scotland, but then she went to India during the English colonial period, and then she became this sort of clairvoyant. So I don't know, there's a part of me that really likes to think that it kind of runs in my blood a little bit, but I just haven't had enough supernatural experiences to really confirm any of it, really.
There's like a little bit of like a feminist, especially like within your bit about the alchemy, your piece, The Alchemist. There's kind of a while I was reading it, I was like, oh, it's she. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of surprising because you think alchemy, at least when I'm reading alchemy or even stories about alchemy, it's a lot of male centered activity, which historically I guess makes some sense. But
Yeah.
so I guess I kind of wondered, like, how does the image of the female alchemist like surface in your writing? And I just wanted you to talk about that a bit.
Yeah, I think I got, I get annoyed reading about all the men doing all the things in history, and it's sort of,
Amen.
yeah,
Yes.
it's very frustrating. So, and I also thought, I think about my mom and I think about women I've met, and I think if anyone has the sort of power and also the rationale to like do all these things, like transmute metals or create, I don't know, creating potions is more of a witch thing. But I also wanted to look at how, alchemists were revered as like, well, I don't know if they were revered, but when you think of an alchemist, you think of a man with a lot of books. You think of a witch, it's like a woman like in a hut somewhere. And I was like, well, maybe they're doing parts of the same thing, really, and maybe they're like having like a lot of witches work is very practical in like healing things or trying to bless the ground so that the crops grow, and maybe there's more use to that than simply trying to create gold or I don't know, all the other things that alchemists do.
Is alchemy at all like a part of your life outside of like your writing at all?
I think it's such a fascinating topic because I love how, you know, alchemy was mixed with science, and back then it was like natural philosophy. And I think another part of The Alchemist is about how philosophy has become very, it's a lot of theorizing. And back then with alchemy, it was like you were actually doing things, you know? And now philosophy is just sort of writing things. And I don't know, I was trying to call back to a time when people put things into practice.
Because your poetry, I found that it deals a lot, like it deals heavily like with the body and body parts interacting and kind of sometimes in like uncomfortable ways, maybe sometimes even painful.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I just wanted you to talk a little bit about like the role of the body in your poetry.
That's a really good question. I think that the body is also, I know this is a really philosophy heavy, I'm sorry, but
No, that's your thing, right?
the body is really overlooked in Western philosophy, I think. So there was that sort of dualism where the mind is like where all the higher power happens and it's more lofty and it's the man with the book. And if you use your body, you're basically a peasant, you're farming. So, and also like I just feel like women also are always seen to be in their bodies rather than men who, you know, it's the absent-minded professor who doesn't trim his beard, as opposed to the woman, you know, it's more okay for him to be sort of unkempt and like really absent-minded, but for the woman it's like her body really represents who she is.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
yeah, so I think the body is very important, is more important than it, you know, the wellness culture right now is good, but I also think that a lot of mental things can be linked to physical things as well, and we tend to overlook that actually maybe getting a good night's sleep for like a little bit can maybe help you a little bit, or just taking a minute for like, I don't know, to sit down and do the sort of meditation type things. I think they're really overlooked but they're coming. I think they're becoming more popular nowadays. But
Yeah, there's like a new agey movement, you know.
yeah, exactly. But I think you can take something from that and actually take care of your body. I wrote a sort of zine called "Admit You Are a Machine," and yeah, the title kind of
That's very
stems.
compelling. Yeah, I love that title.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it basically stems from how you do need to look after the body you're in, the machine you're in. I don't know, and that will link to your mental faculties, and then how well you're able to control your mental state, and you know everything that arises from that. Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, because I think I even mentioned it to you that I was really compelled by your one poem, "There's a Man with a Suit." What inspired that? I mean, if you want to tell me, if you don't want to tell me, that's cool too.
I think it's just me being very dramatic and very frustrated sometimes at the way society treats women, basically. That's what, yeah, I think that does spur me on quite a lot. And it's just the way that, you know, the patriarchy can like fill in, so can make it so impossible for you to breathe sometimes, almost, unless you're like alone. I don't know, it's
No, I think a lot
yeah.
of people feel exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I just had a bad day probably, and I had to get it out there.
Well, it worked. It worked for me at least.
Well,
You had another piece that you sent me, Canto 2, I believe it's called, right?
Yes, so that's a short segment from a longer poem that I did called Bedwyr, which is like Bedwyr, which is I think it was like some ancient, or not ancient, it's some sort of Gallic word for like gravestones or something that I found suitably gothic, and it's just a long poem, longer than I normally do, and it's about sort of weird and magical things happening in a university that ends up in like a death. So I sent you a couple of stanzas from that because it's a very long poem. I think it's 20 verses long, so you don't need to read the whole thing out.
Cool. I think that wraps this up pretty nicely, actually, Flora. I want to give you a chance at the end here to plug anything on Earth that you possibly might want to plug. Anything at all, go for it.
This is very exciting. I write most of my poetry and anything I feel like on my WordPress blog, and it's just called Attack of the Paper Wizards. No spaces, and that's it. Really, that's all I really want to plug. Just my writing.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah.
There is a man with a suit on top of me, the pressure crushing and choking and bending me down. The man has no ears and is nothing but lips. His voice is the loudest thing I've ever heard, and it deafens all around him. The man is clever, but I know I am too. We stay in this position, deciphering each other, second-guessing our moves in a game of invisible chess. His mouth talks constantly. His mouth, I say, and not him, because that mouth has nothing human in what it bellows. Nothing human. He sits on my back and tells me to get up. When I try and answer that he is too heavy, he talks over me. Nothing makes me angrier. Nothing more filled with unjust weakness. I slump down to my elbows. There is a gene in humans for cooperation. It is what tells us when someone else is not doing their fair share of the work. We had it then, but I don't know about now. I don't think it works across long distances. Another tactic, shake him off. Gradually, I gather all of my strength, all my rationality, which is a prize to me. I don't have to departmentalize myself, not to exist as a contradiction. I try and tell this to the man, as I thought it was insightful, but he doesn't listen. Why did I try? I imagine this struggle will take a while, so I'll leave it here with you. When the man falls, or jumps, or lets go, then maybe I will begin to slowly straighten out my stiff body. My back will begin to straighten, and I will feel free.
All right. That'll do it then, won't it?
Yeah, that was it. That's all of them.
What would you say? Any closing comments on these conversations you've had, Olivia? What was the best part about doing this project?
It was nice to be able to talk about art again, but that's a little bit of a selfish thing. I think I enjoyed getting to just talk to people who are artists, because it's hard right now for all of us artists. I mean, for everyone, but with COVID, it's hard for a lot of these people to be making money off of their art. So I think I just went on a tangent, but
no, I think that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what people forget a little bit when they listen to us, or maybe they don't, maybe they're well aware of this, is that while we are researchers, I'm a hardcore researcher, PhD, all that fun stuff. But most of my life is in art. I spend a lot of time making theater with you and with the other alchemical actors in the wide world, and creating original projects and performing. Which is why we do the podcast in part, but it focuses so much on the history. Sometimes the creative aspect gets overshadowed. So I was really excited about this episode and getting an opportunity to talk not just about history, but talk about art with living, breathing people.
I also just liked really talking to people who like us, to be totally honest. It was really nice to actually talk to people like Nikki, who have been subscribers since I can remember.
Yeah.
So that was just really
Long-time
nice
fans.
for me, yeah.
Not that the world is full of people who hate us.
No. I mean, maybe. I don't know, but...
The trolls are in the minority in the among the confessors.
Ignorance is bliss. I don't need to know.
Well, that was great. So let's close things up. Do you know the magic words?
Like the ending thing that we do every single time?
It's time to end the thing.
I hereby adjourn and declare closed this meeting of the Secret Order of Alchemical Actors till such a time as we get together and do it again. I almost said and interview it again, but that would have been a hot take.
I want to encourage all of our listeners to hop on our website or visit us on Instagram to check out links to all of the artists who we talked with today.
Yeah.
Or Facebook. We're going to be doing it across our social medias. So if you want to, I know they all did their plugs, Olivia, at the end of the conversation, but if you want a handy way of just clicking and accessing their work, hop on to any of our Occult Confessions internet presence is.
Yeah.
So, here we go. This is it. We've got one more episode in alchemy. So that is going to be on Chinese alchemy. I have to get another China episode, and it's been a while since I've done something about China. Longtime listeners know I love talking about China. So we're going to make that trip back to China to do an exploration of that immortal sage on the mountaintop dispensing Taoist wisdom on the elixir of life.
Well, damn.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's it. We will catch you next time here on Occult Confessions.
Bye.